Last spring, I installed the popular Evil Energy catch can on my Volvo wagon. It completely solved the problem of PCV vapors making a mess of the intercooler and boost piping, but it introduced an unexpected side effect. Here's a look inside after just shy of 500 miles. It has accumulated quite a lot of material. And it's mostly water, and some solids at the bottom. As usual. Well, yeah, I expect a catch can to be a maintenance item, but if I can barely get 500 miles in fairly mild Southern California winter conditions, that's a little bit of trouble. If I lived in a colder area and maybe did a bit more short trips, I might have to be emptying this thing every 100, 150 miles, and that's kind of ridiculous.
That's a scary amount of water in the catch can, and it might suggest an internal engine problem, but none of the other symptoms are there. It never burns any coolant, and there's no trace of antifreeze in the oil analysis. Blow-by is minimal. Even when I intentionally blocked off the PCV system, I just got a lazy curl of vapors coming out of the oil fill cap when I opened it. It runs smooth with no sign of compression problems, and it never burns any oil, so I think the rings are in okay shape.
All this junk would be passing almost harmlessly through the PCV system and the intake, other than making a mess of the intercooler and boost pipings. It is less about shorter long trips and more about the ambient temperature and humidity. This here is from around 350 miles, all done in 2 long trips over the course of 1 day. And even then, this is still largely water. It was pretty chilly and humid on that day, and what's in the catch can here shows that it clearly was not getting up to temperature very well, even after literally hours of sustained highway cruising. A little bit of goo in the inlet port, basically nothing in the outlet port, steel wool, a little bit of slime, dripping wet, same thing with the baffles, same thing with my DIY baffle. These heat shields do a great job at keeping the infrared from the exhaust and the turbine housing off of the rest of the engine bay, which includes the catch can. When the car's at rest or in stop-and-go traffic, yeah, heat convects up off the exhaust and will warm up this area quite nicely, but as soon as things are moving, all of that ram air through the radiator and through the engine bay cools everything right down. Simplest but least desirable option is remove the catch can entirely, return the PCV configuration to stock, and just deal with oil slime coating the boost pipes, dripping out of the intercooler, dripping off the turbo, making a mess of the throttle body and the manifold, blah blah blah. I really don't want to do that. I could try insulating the tubing leading into the catch can, but I simply don't think there's enough heat in total, and that would only become effective on a longer trip and do nothing for the short or medium-term trips, which make up more than half of my driving. So that leads me in the direction of actively heating the catch can somehow. A PTC element that's self-regulating, or a conventional resistance heater with a thermostat of some sort. But this is an internal combustion engine. I got all the heat I could ever need right in the cooling system. And connections for the heater core are right underneath the catch can. Of course, because of the packaging of this engine bay, a few things need to move before I can access those hoses. Can just get eyes on the supply line to the heater core underneath the lower radiator hose, but there's still a bunch of stuff in the way. Can see a little bit of goop collected in there, but trust me, this is much cleaner than what it would be without the catch can. Going to be a bit tight space-wise, I will have to be creative, might have to move some of those wire harnesses, but there's a rough idea. Let the bulk of the heater flow go straight through, and just have a little tap off going up to the catch can. Those lines represent one of the lowest points in the system itself, so there's still going to be trapped coolant, but I can get most of it out pretty nicely through the radiator and out of the block before I cut those open. Front air guide removed. Looking down here, this is where the intercooler weep hole deposits. There's a little bit of oily residue, but for the amount of miles that this has been on since I last cleaned it, there is a fraction of what there would be without the catch can. The turbo compressor housing is still clean. I've not wiped it off once since I installed the catch can. System is completely cold, of course. Starting. Yuck. Darn it. Getting coolant everywhere. Got the camera and floor cleaned up, and meanwhile system is slowed to a trip. Drain plug does use an O-ring, and I consider it a single-use item. If I have to pull the plug, it gets a new one. Got the drain pan lined up below best I can, with the spill mat. Got more drop cloths over there on standby. And this is another classic case of the camera, the light, and my eyes all competing for the same narrow opening to actually see what's going on. I'm using a non-hardening pipe thread compound for assembling my T-fittings. It has a broad temperature tolerance and an extreme pressure rating, so it should be perfectly suitable for an automotive cooling system with a pressure relief setting of around 21 psi. Trimmed a small amount out of that heater return line. Showing the actual process was near impossible because of the competing line of sight problem. The factory bend in that heater hose is not conducive to inserting a straight section with those brass fittings. I'm going to have to replace that section on the left in order to get the angle I need. Well, there's a change of plans. As I was monkeying around down here with the heater hoses, I heard a dreaded creak from that firewall junction. That piece is plastic and has a tendency to crack if you look at it too hard. Looks like I'm doing a bonus firewall junction delete as part of this job. It's actually lucky I opened this up. I see clear evidence that the O-ring connections to the heater core have been weeping a bit. That's fairly new, but evidently at least one of those O-rings is not too happy. There's the other side of the problematic junction right next to the accelerator pedal. I don't see evidence of that part leaking there, but that whole problematic assembly is going away. Yoink! There's a heater core. Pinch in the tab, wiggle and pull. Pinch the other tab, wiggle and pull, and the whole thing comes out. Considering what's at stake, there's really not a whole lot holding these hoses on. Had concerns about those tiny T15 screws being seized in place after so much time, but at least the one on the right was barely hand tight. After some fighting with it, this is what came out. You got the cabin side and the engine side. They're not really held in by much. Well, that one just snapped in half like it wasn't even there. Something, be nice until it's time to not be nice. Yeah, that didn't take very much force either. Definitely has seen better days after so many years and hours at temperature. Here is bulk heater hose. It slides right through with a little room to spare. We'll need to do some air sealing up to keep fumes from the engine bay from getting in the cabin. No longer have need to support the quick release cores, so I'm going to nip both of the barrels off flush with the rest of the structure. Now just need some quick cleanup and deburring. Got the sharp edges cleaned up, but notice something a little bit concerning. You can see right there where it's cracked. And the other side, exact same thing. I wonder, that might have been the cracking, creaking noise I heard when I was messing with the lines earlier. Whipped up a batch of classic 2-part epoxy. Hopefully we'll stabilize those screw holes and keep this from just falling out. The bends here are slightly smaller diameter, and I want enough room to manipulate the hose and the clamps once everything's installed. I'm probably going to want to cut these somewhere around here and here. And I can use a proper tubing cutter to make a nice clean cut on this aluminum. Needs a little bit of deburring, but much easier than using the rotary tool or a hacksaw. Other thing I can do with everything pulled apart is take my flare tool and put a little bit of a flare on the ends of these tubes. I don't need a full flare, just a little bit of a bulge, so when the hose is clamped over the top, it is discouraged from simply sliding off the smooth aluminum and blowing open. It's subtle, but that little lip can make all the difference between a hose staying on and a hose blowing off. It's ready to go back, except for the O-rings. Can tell how these have been flattened with time and heat. They are normally round in cross-section, at least when new. Heater core looks okay, cleaned up the mating surface for the O-rings, should be good for reassembly. Slowly getting this nonsense back together. Heater core is secured, have one of the inside connections made. Doubled up clamps for safety, even though there's really no way that hose can slide off. That's not going anywhere. Here's what it looks like on the engine side. I've not cut the hose to length yet because I'm still figuring out how I want to route it. But it needs to come out of here, make that turn, and then make that turn up. Can see that's gonna kink it right there. So I'm gonna need some 90 fittings. Adding a street 90 into the mix seems to solve that problem. Would be more elegant if I got a 90-degree barb fitting, but those weren't in stock, so it is what it is. Also had concerns about the hose kinking right where it has to go through the firewall, because with that intake tube in place, it'll have to make a turn something like that.
Definitely too sharp for this type of hose. That's going to restrict.
3/4 inch PEX fits perfectly on 5/8 inch hose.
Test fitting's important. Got it to tuck right under that intake tube. Not that the light is cooperating. Should have room to make that turn, but that's what I gotta find out next. There's a return branch done, aside from the stub that's going to run up to the catch can. And yes, the intake tube does fit. Doing the same thing for the supply side. Double clamps on the inside, passing through the firewall. Supply side teed in. Much easier routing there, though I did have to add that hose clamp in the middle to discourage it from kinking where it makes that turn. Got this mess all clamped down with anti-chafing protection. Hoses are stubbed up here, approximately where they'll end up. So enter the very sloppily coiled catch can heater prototype. 1/4 inch refrigeration type thick wall copper tube. Tightened up the coil, added some zip tie structure, which will also provide anti-chafing. It pretty nicely hugs around the catch can, like so. Getting the coil mocked up and secured to the upper torque mount. It's going to be on the left side now instead of over here, sandwiched between the torque mount and the brake reservoir like it was before. That'll make routing some of the hoses easier and maintain better access underneath. Before, the catch can had to be removed to even access any of the PCV lines. Using compression fittings on the copper, going to 3/8 barb to the flex lines. This T up here with the plug on top hopefully will help bleed air out. This will be the new highest point in the cooling system, so it might tend to accumulate bubbles unless I give them a way out. Got everything all cinched up for the cooling system. Strained the coolant through a rag to catch any large particles. There's a few little specks in here, so it wasn't like it was full of sand. Bleeder plugs removed, catch mats underneath. Fingers crossed I do not get a waterfall underneath when I start pouring the coolant in. No drip from the heater core connections, yet. That took just shy of a gallon. Got, I don't know, 1/3 of a gallon in this jug. Gonna try to purge some more air out if I can. Here it hissed through the vent line, but it's not really able to pull anything else in with the thermostat closed. Not sure if I'm able to raise the expansion tank up any. Oh. I think it's purged up through the line here because I just saw a little blip of fluid come out through the open bleeder. Got this area put back together with the exception of the top half of the air filter assembly. And I've whipped up this cozy little insulation blanket for the catch can. If this proves successful, that's when I'll look into a more permanent and aesthetic solution. Catch can slides right in. Everything hooked back up except the intake snorkel. Time to get the air out of the cooling system. I don't immediately see anything puking out, so that's a good sign. All dry inside in the heater core area. After just a few seconds of running there, an air bubble must have worked its way out because the level in the reservoir suddenly dropped. Still gonna take everything that's left in this jug and then some more. I wasn't able to capture everything that drained out, especially when I did the heater core. And with my catch can item there, I've added to the system capacity, so I will need more coolant than what drained. Looks like there's a little bit of an air pocket in the outlet side of the catch can heater. You can see those is nice and warm up top where the fluid's splashing around. And then there's this cold section with a warm streak running down the pipe. Going to carefully loosen the bleeder plug here. Gonna tuck a rag under there. Nice and polite. Ow, that's hot though. Can even see the coolant flowing. And it's about to overflow. Now there's more of a full temperature pattern on that return hose. Catch can itself is starting to warm up pretty quickly. It would definitely not be this hot with just the crankcase vapors. As you see, the crankcase hose is cooler than the catch can is now. Reservoir has emptied itself again, so air is working out. System is warm, but doesn't feel to be under very much pressure at all. I'm still going to open this very slowly. The tiniest hiss, I'm pretty sure the microphone did not even pick that up. That's pretty well emptied the reservoir. I can just see a little bit of reflection down into the outlet pipe of the reservoir. Okay, so that's everything that I captured, and it's still barely at the minimum mark, and it may drop even further. There's definitely air still in the system. Mentioned in the other catch can video just how wet combustion engine exhaust is. Look at all the water that came out of the tailpipe, and that's just in the few minutes of idling here in the garage.
After the system had a chance to cool down and equalize, reservoir is empty once again. Worth mentioning that this engine has been converted to use the green universal coolant for a very, very long time. I believe this originally would use the Volvo blue coolant, I think, but I can't remember a time when it didn't have green stuff in it. Put a bit of duct seal putty around where the lines go through the firewall. Those will keep fumes and heat from coming into the cabin. This stuff is normally used to seal electrical conduit and raceway against drafts. Wide temperature tolerance, low odor, and effectively fireproof. Alright, tools packed up, reservoir full, catch can secure, everything is stone cold the next morning, as seen on this infrared video right here. Time for the shakedown run. Timer is going. We'll check back in a few minutes after a loop or two around the neighborhood. There's about 10 minutes of gentle cruising around. Coolant is up to temperature. Oil and transmission are getting there, but not all the way. Just a little less than 4 miles in total so far. Still got fluid in the reservoir. Don't see any new leaks over here. Peeking in here at the catch can. That's already warming up quite well. After the shakedown and running errands around town today, I've realized that the catch can does heat up faster than before, so it's much better than what it was, but I'm still not fully satisfied. It's heating up faster, but not super fast. It's not an airlock or flow problem because both the inlet and outlet pipes get plenty hot. In fact, there's very little temperature drop between them. That, coupled with the catch can still being a little bit sluggish to warm up, means that it is a thermal interface problem, not a heat delivery problem. I see a little bit of milkshake starting to form in the inlet port, further reinforcing that it still needs to heat up faster than what it is. When I put this thing together, I deliberately used the zip ties to create standoff between each coil and its neighbor. That prevents them from vibrating against each other and rubbing a hole in the pipe, and also stiffens the whole assembly so it can support itself and the weight of the catch can. Great for structural integrity, bad for heat transfer. The copper doesn't directly touch the catch can, it rests on the zip ties. That means conductive heat transfer is off the table, leaving just radiation and convection. Convection isn't going to work so well because there's still enough openings. This isn't a completely sealed enclosure, so air can work its way out without necessarily heating the catch can before it does so. And this copper coil is not a great radiator, and the catch can itself is not a great infrared receiver. I need to increase the heat transfer between the coil and the catch can, and to do so, I need to increase the surface area in contact. I'm going to try the JB Weld Steel Stick. It's an epoxy putty, not the more liquid two-part epoxy. So hopefully I can mold it in between the coils and on their surface around the inside, and then press the catch can into place to essentially cast a heat transfer surface that perfectly matches it. Quick wipe with isopropyl. Should be pretty clean, but who knows? I want the stuff to actually stick. Yeah, there was a bit of dirt on there. This stuff apparently sets in 5 minutes and can cure in as little as an hour, so I'll have very little working time once I mix it. I'm going to put some silicone grease on the catch can because I want the epoxy to stick to the coil, not to the catch can. Not actually used this stuff before, so first time for everything. Pretty tacky stuff. It's trying to stick to my gloves as I do this, and it warns multiple times on the packaging, do not get it on your skin. Take this worm and smush it in between a few of the coils down at the bottom. Change of plans. I am going to put a thin layer in, just kind of fill up the space in there, and then, if needed, sand it to fit so the catch can slides in nicely. Since it's pretty easy to apply, I'm actually going to mix a slightly larger batch this time. Okay, yeah, that's working. I'll check back when I have that all filled up. Interesting stuff. Feels like working with lightweight modeling clay almost. It still feels somewhat soft, so even though it's been a little bit, I'm going to see if I can just squish the catch can down into place and kind of mold it into shape. Unfortunately, that feels like a no-go already. Let this stuff cure and then sand it into shape.
Wow, the stuff does actually cure so fast. Dry to the touch, no longer tacky. I might be able to start smoothing it now because I'm doing this for the interface surface, not the structural bonding of all of the coils. Well, after way too much sanding and grinding off the lumps of the epoxy, I can now get the catch can to go in and come out smoothly with a bunch of dust still in there. Well, decent in theory, in practice this was not the best idea. Well, there is going to be more direct contact between the coil assembly and the catch can, and it might be a little bit more effective at infrared radiation. I'm not sure exactly how well this is going to work. Starting from cold, though not quite as cold as the other day. Different time of day, and I can't control the traffic or the weather, so it's a little bit warmer out, and it took a little bit longer to do the same shakedown route that I did the first time. Taking a peek at the catch can, it does look like it's warming up faster, even taking into account the fact that it started a little bit warmer when I began this trial.
Those temperatures look really promising, so in theory this should work, but the only way to tell for sure is to get out and drive. Put 500, maybe 1,000 miles on the car and see what collects in the catch can. I'll see you after a very convenient time skip.
Alright, that makes almost 1,000 miles since I put the catch can heater in. Tape's gonna need a redo as expected, but the insulation's working pretty well because, whew, that's still pretty warm in there. It's been a couple hours since I was driving last. I don't drive a whole lot, but I think I've put it through its paces. Short trips, long trips, cool weather, warm weather, in town, and freeways. Yikes, that is still hot. Easier to remove though. Small amount of slime and emulsion in the inlet tube. Outlet tube is actually really clean. It's got an odor, but there's not really any material stuck to the walls. Small amount of material in the inlet and outlet ports, but not the layers of slime like I would see before. Dipstick looks oily, but evenly so. Does not look like the tip was submerged in the liquid yet. You're seeing it firsthand, same time as I am. How much has collected this time? Ooh, looking good. Can just see little traces of emulsion in there, but that's largely liquid oil. Baffle looks pretty clean, though there's a few of those chunks, more the same of what I see floating around in the bottom of the oil reservoir here. Looks like more of the same on the inlet baffle and filter. Liquid oil, maybe a few chunks here and there, but it's not plugged up. Giving it a massage with the paper towel to knock off the liquid oil. That looks about like what I would be getting off the dipstick at around this time. Stainless wool is still in good shape. I can put that right back. It's subtle, but can see the difference in how much oil is clinging to the walls of the inlet chamber and the outlet port. I'm not even going to empty the little bit of oil collected in here. I want to wait for enough to collect so I can send that into the lab and get it analyzed as well. This here's excellent news. It means the catch can maintenance has gone from every 500 miles to every probably 5,000 miles. Fixed up the top of the insulation blanket, made a little bit more secure since I'm not going to have to constantly be opening this to empty the catch can anymore. While I'm confident I've solved the condensation problem, there's always more tinkering to be done. If I try a different baffle design or make an improved heating jacket, those will definitely feature in a future video, as well as when I collect enough oil in the catch can to get that analyzed. In the meantime, I got lots of other stuff in the works, and YouTube has some suggestions floating up over here. Thanks for watching.